The World Food Programme and Food and Agriculture Organization say famine is no longer a threat in South Sudan.
With the declaration, it was possible to really negotiate hard to ensure that we have access to these locations. And so we were able to go in immediately, and we increased the frequency of assistance. We were there every single month. And it was not just the food, it was food, nutrition, water sanitation, the vaccinations as well.
However, they have warned that food security remains fragile and the country needs more support to ensure it doesn't slide back into famine.
The situation in South Sudan remains critical. The number of people who require assistance is incredibly high. The humanitarian support needs to continue and even scale up in some locations.
The deteriorating security situation remains a major concern, with ongoing clashes between the army and opposition forces. However, the government says it's committed to averting a crisis.
The food security situation will continue to be monitored in real time to ensure timely decisions are made to respond to the deteriorating food security and nutrition situation.
The UN says the country managed to mitigate food shortages because of the rapid response by aid organizations. But humanitarian assistance is only a temporary fix. Experts say the acute food shortage will only end when peace is declared and South Sudanese are able to return to their farms. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, now for more on this story, we are now joined live by CGTN's Will Denslow, who is in New York. Will, it's certainly good news that South Sudan is no longer gripped in the throes of famine, but does this now mean that it will get less support from the UN and or the international community?
Well, first of all, to look at the first part, it is seen as a big sign of progress. Of course, famine was declared in the country back in February for just the first time globally that famine has been declared anywhere since 2011. So that really shows a little scale of the problem that South Sudan was facing. But of course, as we've heard, huge problems do remain. Around 1.7 million people are facing emergency levels of hunger. Around 6 million people are at risk of starvation. Now, that's 500,000 more than we saw just last month, though that shows just the scale of the issue that the country continues to face. Now, aid agencies and the United Nations really warn that there can be, and there's a huge threat of donors just ceasing their support after something like this is downgraded. People think that the country is out the woods. So the clear message from the international community here at the United Nations is that South Sudan continues to need robust levels of support still.
Now, of course, from a political point of view, lack of peace in the country is also definitely a contributor to food scarcity. Just how worried is the United States about this link between national security and food insecurity?
Well, it's seen as a huge threat, and David Shearer, who leads the UN mission in South Sudan, says that he is certainly optimistic about some progress that's been made on a regional level, but once again calling on all parties to work inclusively going forward. Of course, this is certainly a conflict and an issue that has regional as well as global ramifications. Of course, just later in the week we have a huge summit that's being attended by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres in Uganda. Now, this is a bid to fund around $8 billion for Uganda's refugee program. This largely due to the huge influx of refugees, nearly 1 million coming from South Sudan. So this is certainly a regional issue for the United Nations, and they're calling on huge amounts of cash, $8 billion. Experts we speak to, they say that they don't throw these kind of figures out with wanton abandon. They say they only ask for these figures if they truly need it. The case being that agencies like the World Food Programme simply are struggling to keep up with the growing demand. So huge implications here that the United Nations and the international community are very keen to address, and certainly once again reiterating the message is that peace is really seen as the best way to fully nullify these threats.
Right, Will, thank you very much for that. CGTN's Will Denslow joining us live there from New York.